Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for attending our special Golden Visa and Tax Residency webinar in Portugal. I'm here with my colleague and partner of our immigration desk, Sara Souza Rebolo, and my name is Fábio Seguro-Joaquim, and I work at our tax department. We are going quickly to approach two different topics, the tax residency in Portugal and the Golden Visa regime in Portugal too. Basically and quickly, Caiado Carreiras International Law Firm based in Lisbon, Portugal. We have two more offices in the south of Portugal, Faro, Algarve, and in the north, Porto. Our team, we have different departments, and that here today we have two different departments, the tax department and the immigration department represented at this webinar, but basically we cover almost all fields of law. As I said, when we have, of course, some agreements with different local law firms and different jurisdictions, or that we provide directly legal services a little bit worldwide, to be honest. Several recommendations and awards that our law firm has been granted in the past. And maybe let's go directly to the topic of our today's webinar. Please, Sara.
Thank you, Fábio, and thank you everybody that joined this webinar to know a little bit about the Golden Visa program and the NHR tax regime. I will be speaking about the Golden Visa, and we can highlight already that although the program established since 2012, we had some amendments to the law and very relevant amendments that were established in this year in January. So today we will do a refresh on what is new on the Golden Visa and what are the current options and the current requirements. So for the ones that are not familiar with the Golden Visa concept itself, it's a program of residency by investment, which means that any third country national that is willing to have a second residency in Portugal and potentially a Portuguese passport, European citizenship for him and for the direct family, can obtain it through an investment under the legal requirements of the law, doing in the Portuguese territory in order to obtain this second residency. There are some advantages that are specific for the Golden Visa program, especially the fact that it does not request a preliminary proceeding nearby the consulate. So it's something that the applicant can do directly from Portugal or even from abroad without passing through the consulate, without a Schengen visa or a residency visa. The residency itself with one investment can be granted not only to the investor, but also to the direct family members. So we are speaking about spouse, children, parents, and parents-in-law, including even adult children under some requirements. With this second residency, the applicants, they have the right to access to the Portuguese education system and also to the health system, besides the right to live, to work in Portugal and to freely travel in Schengen area. Being also important to highlight a main advantage that is attached to this program, that is the fact that it only requests 7 days of presence per year for the holder of the residency card. So although it leads to citizenship, although it leads to a permanent residence in the future, and although also allows to live and to work in Portugal, the fact that this program just requests a minimum of 7 days to be fulfilled all the requirements and to give the access to all the benefits. So it's also important to distinguish what are the options. And here we can highlight what are the most frequent options of investments. Although there are currently eight options of investments, from 2012 to now, we can distinguish 4 as being the ones that have more attractiveness between the investors. And those investment options are the simple capital transfer, the investment in real estate, and the investment in venture capital funds. So in terms of the specificities of each option, we can highlight that the capital transfer, and in this slide is not the updated version, so it's 1.5 million since January this year. It can be a simple deposit in a Portuguese bank account, or it can be, for instance, the acquisition of a Portuguese company and also the acquisition of public debt in Portugal. So it's 1.5 million, and with that, the investor can be granted with the Golden Visa. In what regards to the venture capital funds, we have the option of 500,000. It was 350 in the previous law, so up to December last year. And this year it raised to 500,000 in a venture capital fund or more than one venture capital fund. It's important to highlight that the investor, to protect and to diversify his risks, can invest the 500,000 in different funds. Those funds can be investment funds or venture capital funds. The main purpose is the capitalization of company. The capitalization of Portuguese companies up to 60% of the volume of the funds. So it's possible for the Portuguese venture capital funds to invest the remaining amount in other options, including out of Portugal, in order to diversify the risk. The other option of investment that gather most consensus between the investors is the real estate acquisition. In this case, there were no changes in the amounts of investment. So in the standard option, we still have the 500,000, although we have now some important geographic restrictions that must be considered before looking and choosing the real estate that will be relevant for purpose of the application to the Golden Visa. So, important. The minimum amount of investment is 500,000 and can be done in 1, 2, or more real estates. The main purpose is always to purchase, so needs to be the ownership rights that is acquired for this value. And in terms of location, we can divide it into two situations. If the investor is willing to purchase real estate that is qualified or classified for services, tourism, offices, or restaurants or hotel, there are no geographic restrictions. So all the real estates under this classification will be eligible for purpose of Golden Visa application. If the investor differently is looking to have and to do the investment in a standard real estate apartment or villa, so a real estate that is aimed for residential purposes, in this case needs to follow the geographic restriction and needs to make the analysis to understand if the property is eligible or not. And later in this presentation, we will show you the maps to see geographically where the real estates are eligible or not. Another option of investment that is also under the real estate option is the 350 option. This is an investment option that didn't have changes also in the amount of investment. So it was 350 last year, it's still 350 this year, and includes not only the purchase price, but also the rehabilitation works. So basically, under the 350, the investor is paying the price of the property and is paying for the rehabilitation works. So here, the main difference between this option and the previous option is the fact that for this option to be fulfilled, the investor needs to purchase a real estate that has more than 30 years old or that is located in a defined urban rehabilitation area. And besides the purchase, needs to compromise itself to make the rehabilitation works or to hire a Portuguese licensed builder for the purpose. So here we will have, as mentioned, a novelty. So we have now an additional requirement that regards to the geographic location of the real estate. So for purposes of understanding if the real estate is eligible or not, the first step now is to see under the legal documents. So during the due diligence that shall be made to the real estate, what is the classification of the real estate? As mentioned, if the real estate is classified for services or any other purposes than residential, There are no geographic restrictions, so we can skip the next step and we can understand that it's qualified. If, on the contrary, let me just go to the other slides. If, on the contrary, the real estate is licensed for habitation or residential purposes, in this case, we need to confirm if it's located in what the law defines as interior areas of Portugal. And here you have a map where you can see the eligible locations if you are willing to purchase a standard apartment or a standard villa for residential purposes. Important also to highlight that not only the municipalities are relevant here, but sometimes it's even the parish that is relevant for purpose of qualification. And in this case, for instance, you can see that we have a lot in the north, a lot of the interior, some places in the south, Algarve, but also still some places nearby the beach in the coastal area, which is actually an exception and the reason why progressively this year the prices are increasing in these areas, because there are still areas that are eligible, there are areas that are nearby the beach, but as you can see, there are just a few ones, so the prices naturally are increasing because of the demands. A different concept that we also have to take in consideration is the low density area. So for purpose of qualification of the eligibility of the real estate, we need to focus on the interior areas, so the previous map. To benefit from a reduction in the minimum amount of investment, in that case, we need to consider a second concept, the concept of low density area. And here we are not considering parishes, we are not considering municipalities, we are considering a different administrative division of the Portuguese map. And here the eligible areas will be the ones that are in yellow, so more interior. And in this case, we are not speaking about the qualification of the real estate, that was a previous step. We are speaking about a benefit, an additional benefit in terms of investment. And in this case, what is the benefit? The benefit is the reduction of the amount of investment that it's required by the law. And for instance, in the standard option, the $500,000, the benefit will be a 20% reduction. And in this case, we will be eligible for Golden Visa doing an investment of 400,000. For instance, Algarve is one of the areas where this is a very popular option. Also, in the other option of Golden Visa investments that regards to the old real estate, so the 350, here is also possible to benefit from this reduction on the 20% on the amount of investment. And in this case is a reduction from 350 to 280, which is also a plus attached to this program. The steps in terms of the Golden Visa application are very objective. They can take an average time that is considered to be fast. However, it's important to highlight that is always dependent on third entities, and that at this moment, the Immigration Office is under a restructuring process, which can increase some timings and create some delays. Even so, it's important to divide it into 3 stages. The step where we choose the option of investment, and here, after choosing the option of investment, the applicant should hire the legal advisor, the tax representative, and select a bank to work in Portugal. After selecting the providers, it's important to start what we call the due diligence and contract stages. So a stage where the validation of the investment will be done, the preparation of the documents for the Golden Visa application, but also for the investment will be done, as well as the signature of the initial documents that will allow your providers to represent you in Portugal, as well as to conclude the bank account opening process. With this, we will be in conditions to go for the investment contract, to make the payment, and to get the proof of investment. And here is especially relevant to highlight that the law always requests the proof of the use of international capital. So loans are an exemption and only on the values that exceed the minimum requested by the law. And it's important to have a bank in Portugal that is in conditions to certify the use of foreign capital for purpose of this specific investment. So the reason of selecting a Portuguese bank and the reason to open a banking account in Portugal. And with this, with the proof of investment that can certify the utilization of foreign capital, the investment, and the inexistence of any kind of charges or burdens, we can go for the application of the Golden Visa. The application itself can be divided into 3 stages. An initial stage that we call the online stage, where the applicant, represented by the lawyer, will apply with all the documents, but through an online platform from the Immigration Office, for the purpose of a pre-validation of his application. With this initial stage, we can then go to the second stage that we call the notification stage. We will have 2 kinds of notifications. The admission, so it means that it was pre-accepted for the application in terms of Golden Visa next steps, and a subsequent notification that regards to appointments in Portugal. So at this moment, the process also took some amendments introduced by the government and by the Immigration Office. So this notification for appointment purposes will be done in a chronologic order according to the entry date and approval of the application. So sooner the better, because the queue is increasing every day. So it's important to have everything prepared, not to be in the end of the queue. After this notification stage, we have finally the step of coming to Portugal. That actually is the only mandatory step where you need to come to Portugal. All the previous steps, if you wish, can be done from abroad, which was something that was developed during the COVID season. But now, of course, if you are willing to come to Portugal, you should, you can, and probably will speed up and reduce the timings in some stages. So in this stage of biometric data collection, all of the applicants from the family should be in Portugal. They come to a small interview, a small diligence in the Immigration Office in person. They will collect biometric data, and all the documents, the hard copies of the documents, shall be delivered to the Immigration Office. From this moment until the applicant and the family obtain the residency card itself, it can be between 6 to 12 months, maybe less, as now during the COVID, some processes were being analyzed, and finally they will have the residency card. Important to highlight that all the rights, they start from the moment of obtaining the card itself, not before, and it is also from this moment that is counting, for instance, the 5 years period for purpose of citizenship application. In terms of documents and costs, the documents are very objective, so it's a matter of following the requirements and the indications of your legal advisors. Naturally, we will have the passport as main document. It is also important to make sure of a legal entrance in the Portuguese territory at the time of the biometrics, okay? The health insurance, address proof, work certificate, income proof, there are documents for purpose of the main applicant, so the main investor, and especially for purpose of bank account opening. So it's initial information that we need to move forward with the preliminary diligence. And then for even specifically for purpose of the Immigration Office, we will be requested to file the criminal record for all the family members, all the applicants with more than 16 years old. And regarding the investor, also the tax identification number from the origin country. In terms of the family members, naturally, we will be requested to add the document that shows the family link. So for instance, we can be speaking about the marriage certificate or the birth certificate to prove the spouse, to prove the children's or the parents or parents-in-law connection. In terms of fees, The ones that are here mentioned are the fees that they are charged by the immigration office in Portugal. So you can see that we have an analysis fee of 533, which is paid in the moment of the analysis, the online stage where we file for the first time the application, and then a final fee per card. So when the process is definitively approved and the investor is requested to make a payment for purpose of being issued the card that will be the starting point of all the rights in Portugal. Here you can see some statistics. Naturally, they are more updated now in April, but this is to have the big picture since the beginning of the program until last year. And as you can see, more than 10,000 applications were granted just for main investors that are then associated to more than 17 family members. And it's important to highlight that in Portugal, there are no quotas associated to this program, neither any restrictions in terms of origin countries of the applicants. Although now, for natural reasons, all the applications regarding Russian nationals are on hold due to the conflict that is taking place. After 5 years of the Golden Visa, it's a question that a lot of foreigners are doing when they are considering the program. So it's important to highlight that there are different options. There is the standard option that is to keep the Golden Visa. If you keep your investment, you can keep the Golden Visa with no further requirements besides the ones that you will be used to do and to fulfill. However, after 5 years, you can also decide to increase or upgrade your status in Portugal. And you can eventually apply for a permanent residency card where you will have mostly the same rights, but a different security because it's a 5 years residency card. And in this case, you don't need to be renewing every 2 years. So with this permanent residency card, you can benefit still of the same rights, but to access, you should fulfill new requirement that will be the Portuguese language, which will be in terms of level A2. In Europe, we have level A, B, and C, and so you can see that A is the lowest one, so it's just the basic Portuguese. Will not be so hard, is usually associated to a study in terms of 150 hours, which you can take during the 5 years of the previous residency. After that, or at the same time, you just need to have a valid residency card, even the Golden Visa or the permanent residency card. You can apply for the Portuguese citizenship with no additional requirements besides, again, the level A2 of Portuguese. Also important to highlight at this point that neither the Golden Visa, neither the PR, so the permanent residency, neither the citizenship have by themselves any implications in terms of tax residency, okay? So in Portugal, the tax residency is not associated to the ownership of this residency card, is associated to the time that you spend in Portugal or to the declaration of your main residency. So if you have the Golden Visa and just spend here the 7 days, for that you will not be taxed in Portugal. And if you have the Portuguese citizenship, the Portuguese passport, for that you will not be taxed unless you spend in Portugal more than 183 days or you declare that Portugal is your main residency. It is also important to highlight that if you decide to move to Portugal, relocate using the Golden Visa, or later when you get the citizenship, there are tax programs, as my colleague Fabio will highlight, that can be applied for so that you can benefit from a more efficient personal tax situation. Naturally, in case you receive any kind of income produced in Portugal, for instance, you acquire the residency and then you rent that residency, that will be a Portuguese income, and yes, that income will be taxed in Portugal. Either so, there are a lot of double taxations agreements that Portugal has with the different countries to avoid double taxation on that specific income, for instance. Highlighting finally, regarding the Portuguese passport, that is one of the strongest in the world, is in the fourth position according to the global ranking. It gives access to more than 130 countries without visa. And for that, we just request the additional requirement of the Portuguese language knowledge. For children, we should highlight that they can request it if one of the parents requests and gets it first. So children will be the applicants with less than 18 years old. Or for instance, if any of the parents already have the golden visa and they decide to give birth in Portugal, the children that are born in Portugal, even from foreign parents, they will be entitled to request a Portuguese passport immediately, as they have this right according to a recent change to the Portuguese law. The reasons to choose the Portuguese program are several. Here you can have a summary of the main highlights that distinguish between the other programs that exist not only in Europe but also out of Europe. The family reunification concept is very large, so it includes spouse, minor children, adult children, parents, and parents-in-law. It is possible to do the program through a company and not under the personal name. Eventually, also to develop business, this can be very efficient. In case of real estate, it is possible to apply in the stage of the promissory agreement. So if the property is not yet completed, if it is under works, if you are still deciding, it's possible to move forward with the promissory agreements. It is a first step to European citizenship, which is also important as a plan B. Only requests the 7 days of presence in Portugal per year per person, as we mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. And naturally, it's a door to Europe and to the Portuguese-speaking countries. There are different ways to maximize your investments. The tax incentives are one of them, especially if you are moving to Portugal or deciding to open a business. And Fabio will explain in detail how to coordinate the NHR program with the Golden Visa. It's important to highlight the very easy process to do companies incorporations in Portugal, which can then give you the access to the European market, to the Portuguese-speaking countries market. The privileged access that you can have in Portugal for the renewable energy, green and blue projects, and all the incentives from the European Commission. The recent and innovative legal frameworks that are being created by the Portuguese government, very focused on attracting startups, new companies to Portugal to develop innovative businesses. And finally, we should highlight the fact that Portugal is one of the most crypto-friendly countries in terms of no taxation of the income that is produced at a personal level, the possibility to acquire real estate with cryptocurrency, and the fact that we have an island that is now allowing cryptocurrency as a second currency for the daily basis life.
So let's address the tax manner regarding the non-habitual tax residency regime. Basically, we are speaking about a tax residency that is different from a civil residency or the visas or all the golden visa processes that Sarah was speaking about. So basically, we are here speaking about a 10-year program for all that already have or went through the golden visa route and already have the card in the hand, so in the way that become legally in Portugal and then choose to move the address, the tax residency to Portugal, or to all citizens that already have an European passport and simply decide to move and live in Portugal. So regarding the requirements, they are very simple. It's enough to have a Portuguese address. You can purchase a property or you can rent a property and not be considered a tax resident in Portugal for the last 5 years. So basically, this is the two main requirements that are needed to comply with so you can obtain the tax residency in Portugal. So this criteria, it's important to focus one thing. Of course, if you spend more than 183 days in Portugal, and it's almost the same in all European jurisdictions, you will be considered a tax resident in Portugal. It's important while deciding to apply to the Portuguese tax regime, the NHR, of course, to comply with all the diligence needed to leave the country where you are actually considered a tax resident at the moment, so you don't put yourself on the position to be double taxed. Of course, we have, as Sarah was presenting, several double taxation agreements or taxation agreements to avoid double taxation entered between Portugal and almost all countries in Europe, and especially in the world too. So from this perspective, you are going to be on the safe side, but to avoid burdens in the future while choosing move to Portugal, it's important to clarify this topic. What are the main advantage for the NHR regime? So basically, depending on the source country of the income, it will be exempt. In Portugal, if we are speaking about real estate, capital gains, interests, royalties, dividends, this is the main categories for foreign income that arise abroad of Portugal. And paid, of course, to a tax resident in Portugal that has applied and was successfully approved with this special tax regime. Of course, it's important for us always to analyze the treaty to avoid the double taxation entered within Portugal and the source country, to conclude the treatment is going to be applicable to the such income and such country of source of the income. We have here a good opportunity too for all the income arising in Portugal if you are considered to have a high value added activity, and in this way you will comply and will apply a 20% tax rate. Please note that exists a list published by the Portuguese government that details which activities are considered high value added activities, and of course from this professional income arising in Portugal, a 20% flat rate will be applicable. Regarding pensions, we receive a lot of pensioners that decide to choose Portugal as the tax residency because of the weather, the food, because if it's a safe country. It's possible in principle to apply a 10% tax rate for foreigner pensions received in Portugal. Please note that there doesn't exist a remittance tax, and there is no gift tax between parents and children, and between spawns or direct bloodline family members. That's important and advantage too from Portugal comparing to other European jurisdictions. I was speaking, you can see here a table with the different taxation rates depending on the income that we are speaking about, because everything in Portugal regarding tax returns must be complied and has different categories depending on the income, such dividends, interests, royalties, private pensions, capital gains, etc. And of course, it's not mentioned on here at this presentation, but here in Portugal regarding cryptocurrencies, for example, we have 0% taxation on a personal level if it is not a professional activity or corporation dealing with crypto assets. But it's of course still not possible to declare any gains on the tax returns in Portugal because our tax returns are not adapted. So our legislation, in the end of the day, is not adapted for that, and we have a lack of legislation. Of course, we have some binding opinions issued by the Portuguese tax authorities that specifically say that earnings from cryptocurrencies will not be taxed if not a professional activity or activity done through a corporation. And this is, of course, the reason for a lot of crypto asset owners choosing Portugal. And of course, they will apply for this special regime to the NHR regarding the, let's call it, traditional ways, traditional income sources that exist and can be declared here in Portugal. Just a special note for a list that exists in Portugal that it's called tax haven jurisdictions, blacklisted for that reason, that may be applicable an aggravated rate if you have income arising from such jurisdiction, but it is something that we always confirm prior to your if you choose to move to Portugal, of course. And connecting with Sarah's presentation, you can see the two routes, or the two traditional routes to have this and to obtain this NHR regime. If you go through the Golden Visa regime or other visa programs that exists, and after you have your residency in Portugal, civil residency in Portugal, you may apply, and the moment that you have your card in your hand, for the tax residency in Portugal, or you already have a European passport and then you are ready to find your new residency in Portugal, and of course change your tax residency to Portugal and apply for the NHR regime. Basically, it's a quick process. We have maybe three, 4 steps that are needed to be done to obtain the NHR regime. The first step is to obtain a tax number in Portugal as non-resident. So we give a proof of address for your foreign country, and we submit the request as lawyers at the online platform of the tax authorities, and we have your tax number that's going to be granted between 2-3 days, worst case scenario. The second step, after you choose a Portuguese address, if you purchase a property or if you want to rent a property, we can convert your tax number from non-resident to a tax resident one using your new address in Portugal. And the last step is going to be to submit the NHR request that is going to be analyzed and will take between 24 to 48 hours to be granted. Why Portugal? Sarah already spoke about some advantage of Portugal regarding the food, the weather. It's a safe country. Our tax regime, our visas regime that we have here in Portugal, our crypto, lack of regulation nowadays. So basically different advantage that you can find in Portugal. And this is the reason that we are receiving a lot of demands, and Portugal is booming from an international perspective regarding different topics, incorporation of companies, visas, tax regime, etc. And it's something that, of course, we are seeing day-to-day increase, and it's important for you to act. And please feel free, after our presentation, we will send it actually by email, and please feel free to send us your questions, any doubts that may arise, and we will be happy to respond to you by email. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being with you today. Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you. Have a great day. Here you can find our contacts, and you'll be happy to follow up by WhatsApp, by email, or by Skype. Have a nice day.
Thank you.